The chamber of the Concordium pulsed with a tense stillness, as though every breath drawn by the representatives of a dozen worlds risked breaking the fragile fabric of peace. At the center, beneath vaulted ceilings alive with holographic constellations, stood the dais where bargains were struck and alliances sealed. Humanity had been invited for the first time, their delegation seated at the edge of the circle, observers in a theater that had long been beyond their reach. They expected talks of trade, security treaties, perhaps the long-awaited recognition of Earth's sovereignty. Instead, a single voice shifted the balance of the room. The alien woman's words, spoken in perfect translation, hung like a blade above every ear. "I demand a human as my prize." Her tone was not one of arrogance or jest, but a deliberate decree weighted with centuries of authority. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Even among the more inscrutable species, body language betrayed unease. Mandibles clicked, wings trembled, neural filaments dimmed. Humanity's ambassador stiffened in his seat, and the soldiers assigned as ceremonial escorts felt their hands twitch near their sidearms. No one had expected such a request. The woman herself was a figure carved from myth, tall, statuesque, clad in crystalline armor that seemed to drink the starlight. Her hair, pale as frost, fell in sharp braids across her shoulders. Eyes the color of molten silver swept across the chamber until they fixed upon the human delegation. In that gaze there was no mockery, no hunger for conquest. It was something stranger, sharper, as though she were inspecting a puzzle piece long sought after. Confusion detonated across the hall. The Arak sovereign muttered that a demand was barbaric. The insectoid Valen ambassador clattered his limbs in outrage. Even the stoic Kevri, known for showing no emotion, released a low thrumming note that reverberated through the chamber. Among her own people, murmurs stirred like leaves in a storm. Never before had such a request been made in the Council's history. To claim a living being as spoils was a throwback to the galaxy's darkest eras, and yet she stood unmoved by the scandal she had summoned. The human ambassador rose, face pale, jaw locked. "Explain yourself," he demanded, his voice straining to remain steady before the galaxy's elite. "You speak of my kind as though we are livestock or currency. No human will be surrendered to satisfy your whims." The alien woman tilted her head slightly, unshaken by his anger. "This is not whim. It is necessity. One of your species will come with me. Without this, I will not sign the Concordium Accords. Consider carefully what is at stake." Whispers swelled into uproar. Threatening war in such a veiled manner was unthinkable, yet her poise made the words ring as prophecy rather than intimidation. Outside the chamber, news feeds blazed. Across Earth, billions watched live broadcasts of their delegation under siege. Commentators speculated frantically. Did she seek a specimen for dissection? A servant for humiliation? A mate? Conspiracy theories flooded networks within minutes, claims of secret pacts, hidden prophecies, doomsday bargains. Crowds gathered in streets, some burning effigies of her likeness, others chanting her name as if enthralled. Fear and fascination braided together into something volatile. Inside the human ranks, turmoil brewed as well. Military strategists whispered of assassins, envoys pleaded for patience, and intelligence officers scrambled for context. Yet no one could answer the simplest question. Why? Why a human? Why now? Her people offered no clarity. The guards flanking her throne-like seat kept their visors low, their weapons upright, their silence absolute. Their discipline made them appear less like soldiers than living statues, extensions of her will. Negotiations stalled as the council debated. Some demanded the request be struck from record, branding it an insult to civilized law. Others counseled appeasement, fearing the collapse of the fragile treaty. Humanity's delegation had no allies strong enough to dictate the terms. Earth was still the child among titans. The ambassador felt the weight of entire nations pressing on his shoulders, and behind him, the chosen escort detail exchanged uncertain glances. At last, a compromise slithered into being. To preserve peace, one human would indeed be sent, but not as a slave, officially. They would serve as an envoy, a representative of Earth gifted to her court. The language twisted the truth into something tolerable. The alien woman agreed with a slight incline of her head, her expression unreadable. The question of who it would be lingered like smoke. Volunteers were called for, though the word volunteer meant little under the gravity of the moment. Diplomats declined. Scientists hesitated. Politicians recoiled. To be sent with her was to step beyond every safeguard, into the unknown, perhaps never to return. Finally, the burden fell on a man who had not sought it, a soldier assigned as ceremonial guard, chosen not for his eloquence or prestige, but for the simple fact that he was present and unclaimed by other obligations. His name was spoken into the chamber, sealing his fate. He felt the eyes of the galaxy weigh down on him as he rose stiffly, every muscle rebelling, every instinct screaming to resist. Yet his oath bound him, and he moved forward, boots echoing on the marble-like floor. The alien woman's gaze followed him with an intensity that prickled his skin. She studied his face, his posture, as though measuring something no one else could see. When he stopped before her, the council holding its collective breath, she smiled, not with cruelty, not with triumph, but with quiet satisfaction. "Yes," she murmured, voice carrying across the chamber as though it belonged to the stars themselves. "This one will do." And with that, the treaty held, the council adjourned, and the soldiers' world, indeed, all of humanity's place in the galaxy, shifted into an orbit none could yet chart. The soldier had expected chains, a cell, perhaps the cold humiliation of being paraded as a trophy. Instead, he found himself walking through the vaulted corridors of a starship that seemed more cathedral than vessel. The walls shimmered with etched sigils that pulsed faintly, alive with light that felt neither electric nor natural. Everything around him was symmetrical, deliberate, as though the ship itself were carved from a single vision. Guards flanked him, their gleaming armor hiding every trace of individuality. They never spoke, never faltered, their silence as heavy as the air. At the end of a long passage, a door opened without sound. He was guided into a chamber vast enough to swallow Earth's greatest cathedrals. Pillars of translucent stone rose into shadows, each inscribed with runes that glowed in time with his heartbeat. At the center, seated on a throne of impossible angles, waited the woman whose demand had upended his life. She dismissed her guards with a wave, leaving only the soldier and herself in the cavernous hall. For a moment, he stood frozen. Up close, she was no less formidable, though the details of her presence shifted. Her armor was not purely ornamental. It bore faint scars, etched lines of wear that whispered of battles fought and endured. Her eyes, silver in the council chamber, now caught flecks of color, shards of emerald that flickered when she blinked. The soldier realized then that she was not some untouchable goddess. She was flesh, will, and mystery bound together. "You fear me," she said, her voice low, unhurried. It was not a question. "I don't fear you," he lied. His voice sounded too small, swallowed by the vastness of the hall. Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles, though it never reached her eyes. "Fear is no weakness. It is awareness sharpened to survival. But you must learn to master it, not let it master you." "Why me?" The words escaped harsher than he intended. He steadied himself, squared his shoulders as though discipline could hide the truth. "You could have chosen anyone. Why demand a human? Why make me this?" Her gaze lingered on him, as though she were peeling away each layer of his defiance. "Your people are different. Where others bend to fate, you resist. Where others calculate outcomes, you improvise. My kind have studied yours longer than you realize, and still you elude our equations. You are anomalous." He bristled. "Anomalous? That's what I am to you? A curiosity." Her smile faded, replaced by something harder. Not curiosity, necessity. She rose, and though she moved with the grace of water, her presence pressed on him like gravity. "My enemies believe me reckless for claiming you. They believe humans to be weak, primitive, unsuited for the trials that shape destiny. They are wrong. I will prove it." He wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the weight of her conviction stilled his tongue. There was no arrogance in her words, only certainty. She seemed less like a captor than a woman gambling her future on a truth no one else could see. The hours blurred into strange routines. She summoned him often, not to command but to question. What did humans dream of? Why did they create art when survival alone consumed so much of their history? Why did they cling to stories of gods, of heroes, of sacrifices, even when the stars had shown them how small they truly were? He answered reluctantly at first, then with growing candor, though he never ceased to guard his heart. She listened with unnerving attentiveness, sometimes silent, sometimes challenging his answers with sharp logic. Yet he was never allowed to forget his precarious role. In corridors, he caught the stares of her retainers, cold, suspicious, some openly hostile. More than once he felt the brush of whispers, the faint hum of a language not meant for his ears. To them, he was no envoy. He was a blemish on tradition, a human intruder carried into the sanctum of power. One evening, as he was escorted to her chamber, a guard deliberately blocked his path, helmet tilted in disdain. No words were exchanged, but the meaning was clear: one wrong step, and the human would vanish into silence. The soldier forced himself to hold steady, to walk past as though unshaken, though his pulse hammered against his ribs. Inside, she awaited him once more, seated not upon her throne, but at a long table strewn with star maps and ancient texts. She gestured for him to sit opposite her. "Do you know what my people call yours?" she asked. "I imagine nothing flattering." Her expression remained unreadable. "We call you divergence. A race born without pattern, unbound by destiny. Some see it as chaos. I see it as possibility." She touched one of the maps, tracing a finger along constellations he did not recognize. "My kind are bound to cycles, traditions, roles carved before birth. We cannot escape what we are. You can. That is why I demanded you." He leaned forward, compelled despite himself. "You think one human changes all that?" "I do not think. I know." She locked eyes with him, and for the first time he saw something raw flicker beneath the steel of her composure, an ember of desperation, or perhaps hope. "You are not my prize. You are my weapon." The words struck him harder than any threat could. A weapon. Not a guest, not a prisoner, not even an experiment. He felt the invisible gears of some larger design closing around him, each click drawing him deeper into her world. He wanted to reject it, to insist he was no more than a soldier swept by misfortune into an alien's game. Yet a small, treacherous part of him wondered if she truly saw something in humanity that even humans had overlooked. Silence settled between them, thick and charged. He could feel the choice pressing in, though no question had been asked. He could retreat into resentment, clinging to his role as victim of diplomacy, or he could lean forward into the unknown, into whatever destiny she believed awaited him. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, uncertain. "If I am your weapon, then tell me against whom." Her answer came not in words, but in the sharp flare of light from the runes behind her, as though the ship itself had heard and reacted. She only smiled, thin and secretive, and in that smile lay the promise that the true conflict had only begun. The soldier soon discovered that the woman's demand had not merely unsettled the Concordium, it had ignited a war of shadows within her own people. Whispers traveled faster than light along her ship's corridors, words sharpened into daggers, that she had disgraced tradition, that her judgment had faltered, that she would drag their civilization into ruin by binding herself to an alien anomaly. She appeared untroubled, carrying herself with the same poise and certainty as before, but he noticed the subtler signs, the way guards stiffened when she passed, the rare but unmistakable flicker of contempt in the eyes of her advisers. She invited him deeper into her world, beyond ceremonial halls into the sanctum of her command. There, he saw the machinery of power in motion. Strategists bent over glowing maps, fleets repositioned in distant sectors, decrees drafted and dispatched with chilling precision. Yet amid the grandeur of empire, the soldier saw the cracks. Loyalists argued over priorities, voices rising, tempers fraying. The alien woman's choice had destabilized what once seemed immutable. Her rivals now circled like predators, waiting for proof of her folly. He began to grasp the truth of his presence. He was not a prisoner, nor even a guest. He was a fulcrum. His every word, every action, tilted the scales of her rule. If he appeared weak, she would be mocked, her power diminished. If he proved extraordinary, she would be vindicated, perhaps even ascend higher. The realization pressed on him heavier than any chain. Conversations between them grew more intense. She questioned him relentlessly, no longer about human culture in the abstract, but about him, his choices in battle, his moments of doubt, the lines he would or would not cross. He bristled at the intimacy of it, yet found himself answering. When he recounted a skirmish on Earth where he had disobeyed orders to save civilians, her expression softened, a flicker of respect breaking through her mask. "This is what they cannot understand," she murmured. that chaos can birth compassion, not only destruction. But not all listened with such interest. One evening, as he returned from a chamber, two of her officers intercepted him. Their armor gleamed, but their eyes burned with hostility. "You think yourself important because she parades you through our halls," one hissed, voice translated into his A. "You are a blemish, nothing more. When you fail, and you will fail, she will fall, and you will be erased." They did not raise weapons, yet the menace in their stance was unmistakable. He walked away without answering, though his blood boiled with the knowledge that enemies lurked closer than he had imagined. The pressure built toward inevitability. A convocation of her ruling council was called, a rare and perilous assembly where her leadership would be scrutinized. She took him with her, a choice as provocative as it was dangerous. The chamber thrummed with voices raised in condemnation. "You debase us," one elder thundered. "You bring an off-worlder into our sanctum, flaunting him as if he were a talisman. Have you grown so desperate for spectacle?" Others chimed in, demanding she relinquish her claim, denouncing the human as a symbol of madness. Through it all, she stood serene, her silver eyes unyielding. "You see weakness where I see survival. You bind yourselves to old patterns, unable to imagine futures beyond them. This human represents possibility, the path we cannot walk alone." Her words cut through the chamber like tempered steel, but the hostility did not abate. In their eyes, her resolve was arrogance, her vision heresy. The soldier felt the weight of their stays. He wanted to shrink into the floor, to escape the scrutiny of beings older and more powerful than his species could fathom. Yet when his gaze met hers, steady and unwavering, something stirred within him. She had staked her future on him, and to remain silent now would be to confirm every accusation hurled at her. He forced himself to straighten, his voice raw but firm as he addressed the council. "You speak of me as though I am nothing. Perhaps I am. But my people have survived against odds that should have erased us 100 times over. We are not predictable. We are not perfect. But we endure. And if she believes that endurance matters, then so do I." A hush fell. Some scoffed, others exchanged wary glances. Yet the air had shifted. For the first time, he was not merely her ornament. He had spoken as a participant in her gamble. That night, the attempt came. Returning to his quarters, he felt the hairs on his neck rise an instant before the blow struck. He rolled aside, narrowly dodging a blade that sparked against the wall. Figures cloaked in shadow lunged at him with ruthless efficiency. Training took over. He fought desperately, every movement born of instinct rather than calculation. He managed to disarm one, but the others pressed hard, and he knew he would not last. Then she appeared, her arrival as sudden as a storm. Her armor blazed with runes, her weapon a streak of light. In moments, the attackers lay defeated, their armor smoking, their silence eternal. Breath ragged, the soldier realized she had saved him, but more, he had survived long enough for her to intervene. She looked at him not as a liability, but as someone who had justified her gamble. For the first time, he saw pride in her eyes. The following day, she stood before the council once more, her enemies still circling but now forced to reckon with the evidence. She gestured to him, not as property, not as spectacle, but as proof. This human is not a prize. He is proof that unpredictability can triumph where calculation fails. He is the future we must embrace, or we will perish clinging to the past. The chamber erupted in turmoil, some voices raised in fury, others in reluctant acknowledgement. The soldier stood at her side, pulse racing, aware that he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer an unwilling pawn. He was entangled in a conflict that would decide not only her fate, but the place of humanity in the stars. And as her hand brushed briefly against his arm, steadying him before the storm, he understood that his journey had only begun. The council chamber was transformed into an arena, not of combat but of judgment. Her rivals had forced the issue. If she wished to stake her claim on the human, if she truly believed he was more than a spectacle, then both of them would be tested. The soldier stood at her side, dwarfed by the grand scale of the hall, where pillars shimmered with pale light and tiers of alien leaders leaned forward, hungry for his failure. He had been in firefights, ambushes, killing grounds, but this trial of words and will, felt more perilous than any battlefield. She spoke first, her voice calm yet unyielding. You ask why I defy tradition. You call me reckless, obsessed, even heretic. But I see what you will not. Your patterns bind you, your certainty blinds you. This human embodies what we lack, the capacity to defy the inevitable. A roar of dissent followed, and the soldier knew it would not be enough. Her conviction alone could not sway those who had already decided she was lost. The spotlight shifted to him, though no one announced it. He felt their eyes drilling into his skin, demanding proof that humanity's presence meant something beyond folly. He drew a breath, steadying his voice. You want to know why humanity matters? Why one human should stand in this chamber at all? Because we don't belong here. We've clawed our way to the stars with machines barely capable of holding us together. Every step we take against the current, against the certainty of extinction. And yet we endure. His words rang harsher than intended, but he pressed on, fueled by the memory of Earth's scars. We've burned our own world and rebuilt it. We've fought wars that should have ended us, and still we rise again. We are not stronger than you, not wiser. But we are relentless. That is our gift and our curse. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some sneered, dismissing him as primitive bravado wrapped in eloquence. Others leaned back, uneasy, as if sensing something raw in his words that no calculation could dismiss. Her gaze never wavered from him, her expression unreadable yet fierce. She let the silence linger before she stepped closer, her voice threading through the tension like a blade. This is why I chose him. Not because he is exceptional among his kind, but because he is ordinary. If even the ordinary human carries within him the power to defy and endure, then imagine what his people might yet become. We are stagnating, and they are ascending. Without them, we will wither. With them, we may find renewal. The chamber fractured, voices raised in fury and in grudging recognition. But before any resolution could be reached, the storm broke. Her enemies had not come merely to debate, they had come prepared to end it. The doors shuttered as armed insurgents poured in, loyal not to the council but to the faction that had sworn to strip her of power. Weapons fled, screams tore through the assembly, and the trial dissolved into chaos. The soldier reacted before thought, dragging her behind a pillar as blasts scorched the air. He had no rifle, only the instinct drilled into him through years of survival. Grabbing a fallen attacker's weapon, he fought with a ferocity born of desperation, covering her as she rallied her own guards. The chamber became a battlefield, the trial of words replaced by fire and blood. He watched her fight, fluid, lethal, her blade an extension of will. Yet it was not her power that held the tide, it was the strange, unspoken rhythm between them. He shielded her flank, she cleared his path. He called warnings, she answered with precision strikes. Together they carved a line through the chaos, their movements interwoven as though rehearsed. For the first time, he understood what she had meant when she called him her weapon. He was not a tool in her hand but a partner in survival. When the smoke cleared, bodies lay scattered across the floor, and the insurgents had fled or fallen. The chamber stank of ozone and blood, but silence returned, heavy and absolute. All eyes fixed on her and the human who stood beside her, weapons still smoking, chest heaving. She raised her chin, her voice resonant with triumph. You see now. He is not my prize. He is my ally. Humanity is not to be dismissed as chaos, but embraced as the spark we have forgotten. The council could not ignore what they had witnessed. Reluctantly, some bowed their heads. Others scowled, defeated but silent. Her position, once precarious, had been secured not by words alone, but by the spectacle of survival against the odds. Later, as they walked through the ship's quiet corridors, the soldier felt the weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. He expected her to dismiss him, to retreat into the aloof distance she had often maintained. Instead, she spoke softly, almost as if to herself. When I demanded a human, they thought me mad. Perhaps I was. But today, they saw what I saw. You are not anomaly. You are possibility. He didn't know how to answer. He thought of Earth, fragile and flawed, still fighting to claim its place among the stars. He thought of the eyes that had watched him with contempt and the ones that had watched with dawning fear. Humanity's role was no longer a question. It had been forced into the open. He turned to her, voice low. What happens now? Her silver-green gaze held his, steady and unyielding. Now, the true war begins. And we will fight it together. The soldier felt the truth settle into his bones, cold and exhilarating all at once. He had been given away as a prize, yet somehow he had become something more, an equal standing at the threshold of history. The galaxy was shifting, and neither he nor his people could ever return to what they had been. Beyond the viewing port, the stars wheeled endlessly, vast and indifferent. But for the first time, he felt they were not simply distant lights. They were paths waiting to be walked, futures waiting to be forged. And at his side, the alien woman's presence was no longer a burden of fate, but a promise of alliance. Together, they stepped forward, into a destiny neither had chosen, but both had claimed. The ship drifted in the silence of interstellar space, its hull scarred from the ambush in the council chamber. Repairs had begun, but the echoes of battle still lingered in every corridor. Soldiers whispered of betrayal within their own ranks, of enemies cloaked as allies, and of the strange alliance that had saved them when all seemed lost. For the human, the days since the trial had been a blur of exhaustion and vigilance. He had expected relief when the insurgents were driven back, yet unease clung to him like a second skin. Victory had not ended the conflict. It had only revealed how deep the fractures ran. She walked beside him in silence more often now, her presence both shield and burden. Where once she had been aloof, she had become attentive, as though his survival was no longer a mere symbol but a necessity. He felt her watchfulness even when she said nothing, her eyes tracing every threat before it formed. To the others, she was still their commander, untouchable, indomitable. To him, she had become something far more complex, a leader carrying the weight of doubt, a warrior who had staked a future on a gamble no one else dared make. One evening, in a chamber lit by the faint glow of the stars beyond, she broke the silence. The council may have stayed their hand, but do not mistake restraint for acceptance. They will test us again. They must. Otherwise, they admit weakness. Her voice was quiet, yet her words carried an edge sharper than any blade. He leaned against the viewing port, gazing out into the abyss. And when they test us again, do we fight another battle in their chamber until they've had enough? She regarded him with something between pity and respect. No. The next test will not be in the chamber. It will be on the battlefield. They will call for us to prove ourselves in war, where survival cannot be staged. The weight of her certainty settled over him, and for the first time, he wondered whether he had been given to her as a punishment not only for himself but for her. A single human life was insignificant to the council, but if she fell, her vision of renewal would fall with her. He thought of Earth, still fragile, still finding its footing among the stars, and wondered how much of its fate rested in his survival. Days later, the summons came. A hostile fleet, long dismissed as a scattered nuisance, had risen in force at the edge of contested space. The council decreed that she would lead the strike and that her human prize would accompany her. It was not phrased as an order, but as a judgment. Either their alliance would triumph, or it would collapse under fire. When she read the decree aloud to her officers, silence filled the chamber. They did not question her, but he felt the weight of their eyes, skeptical, resentful, fearful. Some saw him as a liability, others as a curse, but none as a comrade. He felt their unspoken verdict. If the mission failed, it would be his fault. On the eve of departure, she sought him out. He found her alone in the armory, her hands tracing the edges of a blade as if seeking answers in its cold steel. For a moment, she looked less like a commander and more like someone standing at the edge of loss. "You understand what this means," she said, her voice low. "If we falter, it is not only us who are condemned. Humanity's place in this galaxy will be sealed forever. They will use your failure as proof that your people belong in chains of irrelevance." He met her gaze, steady despite the dread twisting in his chest. "Then we don't falter." Her lips curved into something that might have been the ghost of a smile. Spoken like a human. Reckless. Impossible. And yet, she sheathed her blade with finality. "And yet it is what I chose." The fleet launched at dawn cycle. Rows of warships cut across the void, their hulls gleaming like predators in formation. He stood on the bridge beside her, armored, armed, yet all too aware that he was not born to this war. The crew worked in silence, their discipline hiding their doubts, but the tension was a living thing that hung over every station. When the enemy emerged from the dark, it was like a storm breaking across the stars. Countless ships surged forward, their weapons blazing. The void erupted into fire. Commands rang through the bridge, the fleet maneuvering with ruthless precision, but it was clear this was no mere skirmish. The insurgents had prepared for annihilation. The human felt the deck tremble beneath him as their ship exchanged volleys, shields straining, hull groaning. Instinct surged within him, memories of battlefields on Earth, of narrow escapes and desperate gambits. Yet this war was not fought with trenches and rifles, but with weapons that tore entire worlds apart. And still, at the heart of it, he recognized the same truth. Survival belonged to those who adapted fastest. She gave him a single order, her eyes blazing with conviction. You will not stand as an observer today. You will fight beside me, and they will see with their own eyes what I saw when I chose you. There was no time for doubt. Together they moved through the chaos of the ship, joining boarding parties as enemy soldiers breached the hull. The fighting was brutal, close, desperate. He wielded alien steel with the same ferocity he had once wielded Earth's crude weapons, every strike driven by the knowledge that humanity's future hung by a thread. By her side, he found his rhythm again. They fought as one, her precision and his relentlessness binding into something greater than either alone. Where he faltered, she struck. Where she stumbled, he shielded. Amid the blood and fire, he realized that this was not merely her war or his, it was their war, and its outcome would decide more than survival. When the last enemy fell, silence crashed over the ruined corridors. The ship trembled but still held together, its heart beating defiant against the void. He stood panting, blade slick, his body screaming with exhaustion. She stood beside him, her armor scorched, her face streaked with the dust of battle, yet her gaze was steady, unbroken. In that silence, he felt the shift. Not in the ship, not in the crew, but in the unseen threads that bound them to the future. They had been tested, and though the war was far from won, they had endured the first crucible together. She turned to him, her voice quiet yet carrying the weight of truth. This is only the beginning. They thought to break us. Instead, they have awakened something they cannot yet name. He nodded, chest heaving, the certainty of her words resonating deep within him. Whatever came next, whether the council's schemes, the insurgents' fury, or wars yet unseen, they would face it not as commander and prize, but as something far more dangerous. Partners. The council chamber was colder than the void outside the ship, its silence carrying more weight than the din of battle. The two of them stood beneath the towering archways, lit by the pale glow of crystalline lanterns, and felt the eyes of a dozen civilizations press down on them. No one spoke, yet the atmosphere pulsed with judgment. The war had not ended. It had merely shifted to a new battlefield, one of politics, ambition, and ancient grudges. The human felt every gaze like a blade at his throat. Where before they had looked at him with mockery or dismissal, now there was calculation, even unease. He had fought and survived when no one expected him to. His presence had become inconvenient, a living contradiction to centuries of prejudice. He should have felt pride, but instead he sensed the trap tightening. Proof of his worth was not the end of their skepticism, it was the beginning of their fear. She stood tall at his side, her armor repaired but still marked with scars of the recent battle. Her posture was unyielding, a silent proclamation that no judgment could undo what had been forged in blood and fire. Yet even she could not ignore the subtle whispers that swelled among the delegates, the carefully measured tones designed to sow division. They would not challenge her openly, not yet, but already they plotted new trials, new ways to fracture the fragile alliance she had dared to build. A voice, sharp and resonant, broke the silence. One of the elder delegates rose, his form draped in ceremonial robes that shimmered like oil across water. "Commander," he intoned, "you have shown strength, and your companion has displayed unexpected resilience. Yet strength and resilience do not equate to wisdom. Do you presume that one human's valor grants his species the right to sit among us as equals?" The words struck like a hammer, though the human had braced for them. He could almost feel her anger beside him, a tension coiled like a storm within her chest. She did not answer immediately. She measured her words with the precision of a warrior weighing the killing stroke. "I presume nothing," she said at last, her voice carrying through the chamber with a resonance that silenced the murmurs. "I have seen with my own eyes what most of you refuse to look upon. He is not proof of humanity's perfection. He is proof of their potential. A single life does not define a species, but it can illuminate what lies buried. Deny that if you wish, but you cannot deny what has been witnessed." The chamber stirred with unease. Some leaned forward, intrigued, while others recoiled as though her words were contagion. The elder delegate narrowed his eyes. "Potential is not enough to safeguard worlds. Potential does not hold fleets together. Potential does not." "Neither does fear," she cut in, her tone sharper now, honed by righteous defiance. "Yet I see fear in this chamber. Fear of what change might bring. Fear of what unity might demand. You fear him because he is not yours to control. You fear humanity because they will not bow to the chains you offer. But fear will not preserve your power forever." The words reverberated like a strike on iron. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the chamber erupted. Shouts, protests, declarations in a dozen tongues. The human stood still amid the storm, his heart pounding, realizing how far she was willing to go. She had not only defended him, she had condemned the very foundation of their rule. When the uproar began to subside, another delegate rose, a younger one, sharp-eyed, their voice cutting through the noise with calculated calm. "If you demand recognition for humanity," they said, "then let it be tested not in skirmishes or chamber debates, but in a campaign where all bear equal risk. There is an outpost at the rim, besieged and cut off. Send your human there, beside you. If he survives, if the outpost is secured, then perhaps his people deserve the consideration you claim. If not," the delegate let the words linger like a noose tightening. The trap was clear. Success meant a temporary reprieve. Failure meant not only his death, but humanity's erasure from the Council's memory. Yet as the human met her gaze, he saw no hesitation in her eyes. Only the steady blaze of conviction. "We accept," she said. Before he could speak, before the Council could retract their challenge. The chamber fell silent once more, the kind of silence that follows the sealing of fate. The human's pulse thundered in his ears, but he did not look away. He had walked through fire already, and though he knew this new trial was designed to break them, he felt something stronger than dread rising within him. It was not blind courage, nor reckless defiance, but the clarity of a man who had nothing left to prove except that he would not bend. Later, in the dim corridors of their quarters, the fury she had restrained finally broke free. "They will not stop," she said, pacing like a predator denied prey. "Every victory makes us more dangerous in their eyes. Every test we endure hardens their resolve to crush us. Do you see it now? Do you understand why I demanded you that day, why I chose this path?" He sat, weary but unyielding. "I understand. They wanted a symbol to humiliate, and you gave them one who would not break. You gambled everything on me, and now they cannot decide whether to destroy us or fear us." She stopped, turning toward him with something raw in her expression, something caught between pride and sorrow. "Then hear me, human. The battles to come will be unlike anything you have faced. They will throw fleets, assassins, entire worlds if they must. You are not their prize anymore. You are their threat. And so long as I breathe, I will not let them take you." The vow settled between them, heavier than any chain, stronger than any weapon. For the first time, he felt not like a pawn caught in a game too vast to fathom, but like a player shaping the board itself. He knew the cost would be steep, that their path might lead only to ruin, but the fire in her words ignited something fierce within him. The Council had set their challenge, and he would meet it. Not as her prize, not as her burden, but as the proof that humanity could endure where others believed it would falter. And as the stars turned beyond the windows of their ship, the shadow of war deepened, drawing them both toward a crucible from which there would be no retreat.